Recent developments in Colorado have highlighted tensions within Republican circles, following a presidential decision that has drawn public criticism from one of the state's most prominent conservative voices. On December 30th, President Donald Trump vetoed a disaster relief bill that included federal funding designated for Colorado communities affected by natural disasters earlier this year. The bill, which passed both chambers of Congress with bipartisan support, allocated resources to multiple states dealing with wildfire damage, flooding, and other emergency situations. Representative Lauren Boebert, who represents Colorado's 4th Congressional District, issued a statement expressing strong disagreement with the president's decision. According to her official press release, Boebert emphasized that Colorado communities have been waiting months for federal assistance to rebuild infrastructure and support families displaced by disasters. The vetoed legislation included approximately $420 million earmarked for Colorado disaster recovery efforts. These funds were intended to address damage from wildfires that burned through several mountain communities and flooding that affected agricultural regions in the eastern part of the state. Local officials had submitted detailed assessments documenting the extent of the damage and the projected costs for recovery. President Trump's official statement on the veto cited concerns about the overall size of the spending package and what he described as unrelated provisions included in the bill. The White House indicated that the administration supports targeted disaster relief but objects to what it characterizes as excessive spending combined with emergency funding measures. This situation has created an unusual dynamic within party lines. Boebert, who has generally aligned with Trump-supported policies throughout her time in Congress, found herself publicly disagreeing with a presidential decision that directly impacts her constituents. Political observers note that this represents one of the more visible instances of divergence between the Congresswoman and the administration. The disaster relief bill in question had received support from Colorado's congressional delegation across party affiliations. Democratic representatives and senators from the state had worked alongside Republican colleagues to ensure Colorado's inclusion in the federal assistance package. That bipartisan cooperation at the state level now faces complications following the presidential veto. Colorado Governor Jared Polis also commented on the situation, stating that state resources have been stretched thin in responding to multiple disasters this year. According to the governor's office, Colorado has already allocated state emergency funds and is working with local governments to maintain recovery efforts while seeking federal support. Residents in affected communities have expressed frustration with the delay in receiving assistance. Local news reports from mountain towns show families still displaced from their homes and business owners struggling to rebuild without the anticipated federal funding. Community leaders have indicated that the uncertainty around federal support is making long-term planning difficult. The legislative path forward remains unclear. Congress could potentially attempt to override the veto, though that would require a 2/3 majority in both the House and Senate. Alternatively, lawmakers might work to craft a revised version of the disaster relief package that addresses the administration's stated concerns while still providing assistance to affected states. Representative Boebert's office has indicated she will continue advocating for Colorado disaster relief funding and is exploring options for securing federal assistance through alternative legislative vehicles. Her statement emphasized that supporting Colorado communities remains her primary focus, regardless of political considerations. This development matters to the public for several reasons beyond Colorado's immediate situation. It illustrates how disaster relief funding decisions can create complex political dynamics, even within party coalitions. It also raises questions about how federal emergency assistance gets allocated and what criteria determine approval or rejection of such funding. For Colorado residents directly affected by the disasters, the veto means continued uncertainty about rebuilding timelines and financial support. Insurance settlements alone often prove insufficient for complete recovery, making federal disaster declarations and associated funding critical for many families and small businesses. The situation also highlights broader conversations happening in Washington about federal spending priorities, the structure of legislative packages, and the balance between fiscal concerns and emergency response needs. These discussions affect how future disaster relief efforts might be handled and what mechanisms exist for providing timely assistance to communities facing unexpected crises. As this story continues to develop, attention will likely focus on whether congressional leadership pursues a veto override, how quickly alternative funding solutions might materialize, and what this episode means for future disaster relief legislation. Colorado communities, meanwhile, continue their recovery efforts with the resources currently available while waiting for clarity on federal support. The coming weeks will reveal whether this disagreement between President Trump and Representative Boebert represents an isolated incident or signals broader discussions within Republican circles about policy priorities and constituent needs. For now, the immediate concern remains ensuring Colorado communities receive the assistance needed to fully recover and rebuild.